Um,
Okay.
okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be able to welcome Mary Lou Longworth here to discuss her new book, Disaster at the Vendome Theater. So Mary Lou has kindly agreed to chat with us about her new book, about, without giving any spoilers away, and her life in Aix. She has been living in France since the early 1990s with her family. Has created the Verlac Bonnet mystery series, which this is the 10th in the series. These books have been adapted by BritBox for a series called Murder in Provence. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it, with Roger Allam as the Antoine Verlac. And we now have the 10th in the series. Mary Lou also teaches writing at NYU and is here to tell us about her life in Provence and the books. So Mary Lou, if you could start, just how did you come to live in Aix, and just how is life living in Aix these days?
It's great. As you can see, we initially thought it would be a 2-year stay. And so all this time later, it was actually in 1996, we were here in Aix on vacation. And since my husband was working in Silicon Valley, we were living in Santa Cruz, north of you guys. And, having a very nice life in Santa Cruz. Our daughter was 3.5, but we came to France on vacation. And while we were here, my husband saw a job posting. And it was they wanted somebody with Silicon Valley experience, somebody who was a webmaster, which he was, and somebody who spoke French, which he did. And so he called them up and they said, come tomorrow for an interview. And so he got the job. The rest of our vacation, I think, was a little bit ruined because he was particularly stressed the rest of the vacation. They gave us 2 weeks to decide. So we flew back to California and decided that we would do it. It was sort of the time to do it. So that was November 96. We moved here on February 13th, 1997. And we thought it would be a 3-year stay. We'd read enough about expats living abroad that we knew we had to stay at least 2 years. Most people leave after 6 months. So, and after 2 years, we were living in the country outside of Aix, and then we moved downtown. And then when we moved downtown, our life changed, because when you live in an apartment building downtown, you get to know your neighbors, you chat with the people who are hanging their laundry, in the balcony next to yours. And so it felt much more community. We were a little bit, I would say, stranded out in the country, as beautiful as it was. And then when we moved downtown, we met our neighbors. They had children the same age as our daughter. And then I met, other mothers at the school. And it was just a great life downtown. Everything was on foot. The market shopping, just you do every day. So, everything you eat is super fresh. And we, just 2 years turned into 5 years, turned into 10 years. And then, so we stayed. Here we are. Yeah.
When you moved to Aix, did you have a background in French? Did you speak French, or was it?
No.
So you
no. No, I remember studying on the airplane. I had sort of basic French. I knew my numbers, my colors. I'd been to France once, but that was years before, and just to Paris for 5 days. So no, not really. Luckily, my husband spoke French. His mother was a French professor, literature professor. And so she raised the kids speaking French. So he was able to handle all of the, the paperwork and whatnot. And really those 2 years in the country, again, it wasn't very good for my French because I wasn't speaking French. He would get home from work and we'd speak English. I'd speak English to our daughter. But when we moved downtown and I started meeting women my age, and they were really, really interesting women from all over France. A lot of people come, I think it's like California, a lot of people come to Provence from other areas of France. And so just listening to them and trying to communicate with them, it was really, I learned it by the seat of my pants, just knowing that these women were really fun and really interesting and really smart. And so I learned it that way after a few years. It took a long time.
Wow, that is a baptism. That is a baptism by fire for those of us who at the for those of us, and there are quite a few the people listening in who take class, including myself, and it's our weekly love-hate relationship with the language.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about being in downtown Aix and proximity to your neighbors. And so what other things do you enjoy about living in Aix? And do you have a favorite spot in Aix?
Yeah, that's hard to say. I mean, I think one tends to gravitate to the Cour Mirabeau, the famous main street, because you're either going up it or you're crossing it, trying to get from what they call the old town to the new town. So I would say the Cour Mirabeau, and even now when I walk up it, sometimes I'll just sit on a bench and just watch people go by and look at the street. There's a favorite cafe. You asked this in another question, is the cafe that they go to in my books a real place? And yes, and it's called Le Grillon. And so that's one of my favorite places too, either to sit inside or sit outside. And that's on the Cour Mirabeau, and it's an absolutely beautiful place. And it's one of the things that one of the places that inspired me to start writing the books, because when I would drop my daughter off at school at about 8:15, and then I would go to the Grillon for a coffee sometimes. And the lawyers would show up and put their black robes on the chairs before they went to the courthouse. And that kind of, got me thinking of a mystery. I've been writing articles, and I thought I wanted to maybe try writing a book and a mystery. And so it all kind of started in the Grillon, watching the lawyers come in and put their robes on the chairs at 8:30. So yeah, that place. And then there are just so many beautiful squares and so many beautiful fountains that, a lot of people write about in Aix. One thing Aix is lacking are benches. So you find yourself you find yourself in a beautiful square, and you have to sit down on somebody's front steps. So, but yeah, and then outside of Aix, the Cézanne's mountain, the Mount Saint Victoire, is one of my favorite places as well.
Okay. So you touched on it a little bit, but so, and it may be a redundant question, but kind of what prompted you to write the mystery novel?
Yeah.
And then I'll segue into, are there other mystery writers or other writers that have influenced your work?
Right. Yeah. So I've been writing freelance articles for newspapers, mostly American, some British. And then it was hard just always freelancing and having to pitch to editors who took a long time getting back to. And so I thought I'd like to try to write a novel, and I wanted to write a mystery, because then that would give me a framework. When you're writing a mystery, you have to, you have a framework of the murder and the suspects, and then the inspector who's chasing them. And so I had started writing down a list of characters or events that I thought would be interesting in places in downtown Aix, because I am really inspired by the streets and the buildings. And then one of the things that really got me started was I was invited to my friend Juliet's parents' house outside of Aix, and she had to go get something in the attic, and she said, "Do you mind coming with me?" I think we were getting stuff for the kids, for some costumes or something. And I went up there in the attic. It's a small chateau, I would call it, a very big manor house or a small chateau. And she opened the door to the attic, and it was just full of treasures. I mean, for a North American to see a place like this, that was just full of antique furniture and oil paintings and gilded mirrors. Lots of them had, they were covered in dust. And of course, the one light bulb barely worked in this place. It was huge. It was cavernous. There were stacks of porcelain. I just couldn't believe it. And then she went over to a window and opened up the shutters, les volets, to let more light in. And she said, "Be very careful, because we're about 4 stories up here, and there isn't glass on the window. So don't, I'm always very careful near this open window, because anyone could fall out." And that then I thought, okay, that's my first scene. So a nobleman whose family chateau this place is will fall out of this window to his death. So I went home and wrote that first chapter. And then slowly from there, that first book took shape. Again, that took a long time too, because I think when it's your first book, you're a little bit wary and nervous about writing. Yeah, I had never written fiction, I'd written articles, nonfiction, but not fiction. So yeah, your second part to your question, I always really liked Donna Leon's books.
I love Donna Leon.
Yeah. And I thought, and also the Inspector Morris TV. I haven't read a lot of Colin Dexter, but I did watch all the Morris series with John Thaw. And I thought, well, you know, Venice and especially Oxford are cities very much like Aix. They're very small. They're very contained. Aix, like Oxford, is a student town. Has a famous university, a famous law school. And so I thought, you know, why not? Why can't these stories take place in a beautiful town like Aix? Because mysteries in France tend to be written, especially dark mysteries, tend to be set in Marseille or Paris. Mm-hmm. And my books aren't dark, but they are mysteries. So I thought Aix would be a really good setting. And Donna Leon and Colin Dexter really, really helped, and P.D. James to a certain amount too. Because I really, really liked her. I really like her detective, and he's very smart, and he has his feet really on the earth. He's not one of those depressed policemen who go home and live alone and drink too much. I mean, he's a poet, and so thanks to her, she showed me another side of how my characters could be. And then Donna Leon kind of let me talk a lot. She gave me the permission to talk a lot about food and wine. So I thought, well, if she does, I can, because it's a big part of our lives. And I get together with my friends, and, you know, the first, I'd say half hour, 45 minutes of our conversation is about what we ate the night before, what we ate at lunch, what we're going to eat for dinner, what kind of wines are going with each dish. It's just normal. So I'd say those three writers were big influences on me.
Okay. Well, so I guess the next question is, are you surprised about the success of your books, and we're now at book 10?
Yeah. I mean, I think one always is, because when you start your first book, it's such a long process, because it took a year to get an agent. And then she found Penguin, but then, you know, I think it took about 3 years finally to see that first book published. And then you just think, oh my gosh, will there be a second book? Will there be a third book? And so, yeah, I mean, delightfully surprised, I would say.
So my question is, and I think I'll put these two together, is what do you think makes for a good mystery? And then how do you plan out your plot twists when starting a new book?
Right. I think a good mystery, I mean, Agatha Christie wrote out some golden rules of mysteries, and I kind of stick to them, that you have to be fair to your reader. And I like the kind of mystery where you lay out all the clues in the book, and so at the end of the book, if your reader hasn't guessed who the culprit is, if they go back and read it, they'll say, oh yeah, there were the clues staring me in the face. You know, I don't like to be sneaky. I think you have to be fair with your reader. So I think I like leaving a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end of each chapter, and so that the reader wants to read on. And red herrings are great. And I think your suspect has to be in the book. They just can't show up, you know, from the beginning almost. They just can't show up, you know, at the end and say, oh, you know, here's this person. Where did they come from? And also, I like the suspect to be somebody that you wouldn't suspect. So, you know, you have all your witnesses lined up, and they all seem kind of decent, or they all seem like they're hiding something. You know, and the suspect is one of them. So, you know, it's not necessarily the obvious person. Let's see, what else? Yeah, I think that's it. And something that I used to tell my students at NYU is that just write with your own voice. You know, don't just And whether you're writing a mystery or any other kind of book, don't try to write like somebody else.
So the next question has to do with Marine and Antoine. And so what were the inspiration? Are these people you ran across, and where did they come from? And then a little side note as it relates to the BritBox series, was Roger Allam in part inspiration for Antoine? Because when I started reading the books, that was who came to mind. So
oh, wow, that's great. No, he wasn't. Marine and Antoine are just a mishmash of people I've known throughout the years in Aix. And so both physically and the way their personalities work. The funny thing about Roger Allam is that I think he's quite well known now, but about 30 years ago, he wasn't that well known. But we've always followed, my husband and I have always been fascinated by him and by his acting. And so whenever he'd have a small role in a film, usually a television film or a television series, we'd say, oh, there's that Roger Allam guy again. And he's in a great series, I think it's about 15 years old now, called The Thick of It, which is a spoof of British politics. And so, yeah, we loved him in that. He's in a very early version of Morris that I remember. And now, of course, most people know him for Endeavour, but that's very recent. So when my film agent called me from New York and she said, they're getting this person named Roger Allam to be Antoine Verlac, I just fell off my chair. Because we just love his acting so much. And I thought, well, what are the chances of that? But no, he wasn't in my head at all. I'm very pleased with their choice, but he wasn't in my head when I started the books. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I have to say, when I heard they were turning it in and it was Roger Allam, I was like, yes. I was
He has a good voice, doesn't he?
Oh, I know. My husband's on his walk, so is not hearing me gush, gush about Roger Allam.
I read an article in a British newspaper. He's the middle-aged thinking woman's, heartthrob, something like that.
Yeah, I concur. So back to Antoine. So one of the things is he's a judge, so he's the investigating magistrate as opposed to a police detective. So what kind of went into the decision to make him more a lawyer versus part of the police force?
Yeah, it was just talking to friends in Aix, some lawyer friends and people who know a lot about the system, because I originally thought he should be the commissaire, the commissioner. And they said, no, the person with the most power is the magistrate. And he or she, I'll say he, because in my books it's a he actually gathers all the evidence that precedes a trial. And I think that's one of the most interesting parts of a mystery. I love all the parts of a mystery where each witness is interrogated or questioned. And so he or she is actually the person who does that, who gathers all the evidence before a trial. And those are the parts of mysteries I like. And so I thought, okay, then that's, they have to be a magistrate. And then that gave me room to make the commissioner somebody else, somebody that can kind of play off him. And I purposely made the commissioner somebody who's a lot more humble than Antoine Verlac. Somebody who grew up on a farm in the Luberon, and it kind of puts Antoine in his place sometimes. And of course, Marine does too. It was obvious that she should be a law professor because Aix has such a famous law school. And then I thought they would have that in common.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that you've taken that Antoine is not from Aix, that he's from Paris.
Yeah.
He's, the whole backstory of the very wealthy with the English grandmother and that whole. Yes. So he isn't from the south of France, so he kind of stands out a little, but he tries to blend in.
Yeah, and even the Aixois will tell you, when we first moved to Aix, they said, "Oh, good luck meeting, people, because the Aixois are very stuffy and very bourgeois, and they won't talk to you." Luckily, we didn't find that the case. Maybe because we were foreigners and we were, very enthusiastic about our life here, and people liked that. I think it might have been harder had we been Parisians fitting in. So, and I do see that. And if you see a car drive by sometimes with a 75 license plate, people just sigh and go, "Oh, Parisians," So, yeah.
I didn't have this in my questions, but just sort of a sidebar, because you hear about the Parisian accent. Is there an Aixois accent or is it more the?
No, no, the Aix-en accent is Parisian, because it's very bourgeois. Yeah, and it's I do have friends that speak with a Southern accent. And they're mostly from south of Aix, between Aix and Marseille. I have a very good friend from Aubagne, who says "pang" like that instead of "pain." Yeah, but in Aix, the accent is toned down.
Oh, okay. I was that just popped into my head. So we talked about one of the things we talked about was the Le Grillon, but just in general, how in creating the X for Marine and Antoine, how much have you invented, and how much does the X of Marine and Antoine mirror the real X?
Oh, it mirrors the real X very much. I mean, I changed some of the names of the places, just because with my first book, I didn't think it would ever be published. And if it did, I thought, well, I should change the name so I don't find myself in a court case, which a British author who named a textile shop in Paris found herself in that situation. And her lawyer argued it, saying she said really good things about this textile store. So why, they were just trying to get money. So I was very cautious. And so I changed the names of where they go get their brioche. It's on the Cour Mirabeau, and you could easily spot it. It's called Béchard, and it's been there for about 4 generations. So the Grillon, the Mazarin is actually the Grillon, but other than that, everything is true to life there. The streets that they walk on, getting to and from places, those are all very, very, very real. The buildings are all very real. It's a city that, since we live downtown, it was, I just got to know so well.
Yeah. So you touched on it a little bit, but what I noticed is that food, wine, and cigars seem to have key roles in your book. And so are they favorites of yours?
Yeah, when I was writing articles, I wrote for Bon Appetit, when that was, a long time ago, when Bon Appetit was still in Los Angeles. Then they moved to New York, and everything kind of went.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, food and wine are huge pastimes of ours. We have friends who are winemakers, friends who are cooks. It's a big part of our lives. I probably shouldn't talk about cigars, because when I did that NPR interview, people didn't like that I spoke about cigars. It's kind of a no-no.
My husband's out walking, but my husband I try to keep him down to 2 cigars a week. So.
Oh, okay. He's doing well. I think cigars have always been associated, and I don't know if it's because of the film industry or what, they've been associated with, Republicans and men. And I belong to a female cigar club. There are 9 of us. My friend from Aubagne raises animals, and she's in the club. I have, there's a dentist, there's me, there's an accountant, we all come from different walks of life. The thing we have in common is that we love food and wine, and cigars are the third. It's a thing you do after you've had a great meal and you've had great wines, and then you smoke a cigar, because the flavor is so amazing if you're smoking good ones. Our chef friends, they all smoke cigars. But I recently met a mayor of a town near here. And, we were and I said, I saw you smoking a cigar. And he said, please don't tell anyone, because I'm a public figure now and nobody can know. It just has this aura, this really negative image, which is too bad. You wouldn't say that about somebody who likes fine wines,
Yeah,
so.
As I said, as I live with a cigar smoker and have banished to the garden to keep the smell out of the house. But yeah. So that was one thing I noticed. I thought, I'm sure he'd love a cigar club. But that's interesting that people are, I never really thought about it. I just sort of thought it was a guy thing, and you go talk with your. So I noticed that you have taught creative writing at NYU, and I just thought maybe you could talk a little bit about the challenges of teaching writing versus the challenges of being a writer.
Yeah, I taught there for 10 years, and I retired in 2017 because 10 years of doing that commute was a bit much. And Yeah, it's challenging because when you're a writer, I'd say the pros and the cons are the same. When you're a writer, you're alone. And so teaching was great because I was with students who were very smart and really fun to be with. But then each student is such an individual, and then they're writing for you, and they have they have their own backgrounds, and their own way of looking at the world, and it might not necessarily be mine, but it's all about communication, and that's where I tried to focus. My teaching is, okay, are you communicating this idea well, even if I don't necessarily understand where you're coming from? So that was the challenge, because every single person is so different. They were all the same age. That's about the only thing they had in common. They were freshmen. So yeah, it was challenging and very rewarding at the same time. So one of the things I told them is just write. You have to write and you have to edit, and you just can't sit there in front of a blank page. You have to keep writing, even if you don't like it. Because if you sit there for a few hours and you write something, and you write a few paragraphs, even, or one paragraph, and if you hate it, I say, there might be something in that paragraph that you like, one sentence that you can take from it, and then the next day get up and take that sentence that you liked and start again. So the importance, I think, just of sitting in your chair and writing, and then editing. Making sure that in the morning when you get up, you can start, what you're going to write. So sometimes I'll leave myself a sentence or an idea, when I turn off the computer at the end of the day, so that the next day I know where to take off from. So I think the danger is just sitting there and not doing anything.
Do you do any kind of, like, when in between books, like any kind of, daily writing drill, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day of just dumping on your computer? Or
yeah, I keep little notebooks. I'm a little more old fashioned. So yeah. So I'll take them, in the living room or outside or something, and just make notes from that. And I think reading, sometimes if I'm stuck too, I'll just pick up one of my favorite books and start reading. And then sometimes something will come to me. Oh, that's really interesting, that idea, or the way that they phrase that, or that conversation that the two characters are having. I think that helps, reading other people's works too, if you're really stuck. Not that, and I'm not saying you're going to steal their ideas, but you can get inspired by the weirdest moments in a book, I think.
So do you have a favorite in the Vendome series? Which of the book?
Yeah, I would say, for some odd reason, the Murder on the Ile Sordou is one of my favorites.
Oh, yeah, I like that one too.
Yeah, and that takes place on an imaginary island off the coast of Marseille. There are quite a few islands, only 2 or 3. I know 2 for sure you can visit, but there are a lot more that you can't visit. They're closed for scientific purposes and stuff. So I took one of them that is closed to the public, but it's very long and narrow. And I took that as my inspiration to kind of set this kind of beautiful 1960s styled hotel that would be there. And it was at a time where we had to move from our apartment because we were renting, and we had just bought a house, but the owner wouldn't move. It's a long story. It was a divorce, and he left and she stayed, and she wouldn't move. But we had our house in Aix, and we had sold our house, and then we bought this new house in the country south of Aix, and she wouldn't move. And so we were stuck. The new owner came. We said, okay, you can move on May 5th. And the new owner came with her truck, and we had to leave. And she wasn't answering the notary's calls. She wasn't answering the realtor's calls. And so everything got delayed, which was her plan, because she wanted to stay for the summer. And we realized that later. And so we just weren't, I think, tough on her enough. And so a friend of mine in my cigar club said, he overheard our quandary, and she said, what are you going to do? It's high season. You'll be paying $1,000 a week to rent someplace. And he goes, I have my grandparents' apartment that's furnished. His grandparents were long dead. It was in a little Provençal village. I'd say about an hour away from Marseille. And he said, you can stay there. I'll give it to you for 150 euros a week.
Oh, wow.
And so he totally saved us. And so I wrote this, and I had started the Ile-sur-Dieu book. And so here we were in this dark little village apartment. It had no terrace, it had no outside space. And it was a really, really hot summer. And so I was writing this book about this beautiful island, but in this dark apartment, dark, hot apartment. And I remember, you know, at the end of my writing day, I would go down to the bar in the village square, you know, and I would get a pastis. It was $1.50. That's how old fashioned this village was. I mean, nobody went to this village. It's in the Var. And so I think that's one of my favorite books, because I just kind of, the writing came easily for some reason. I think because I was there in this apartment, I didn't have X to distract me. I didn't have my friends to distract me. And I was really inspired by this island and its imaginary hotel. I think because I was in this small, dark apartment with, you know, 3 windows, no terrace, nothing. So,
No air conditioning.
no air conditioning. And it was a hot summer.
So what do you think? What do you see next? And I'm not going to talk about the event in the new book, because, as I said, I do not want to spoil it.
Right.
But what do you see next for Antoine and Maureen?
Yeah, I don't know, and I need to have a talk with my agent. We've been meaning to talk about that, and a talk with Penguin. I think 10 books is good, and I'm not sure. I may stop. Yeah. But write something else. Because I leave them in a really good place in the 10th book, and so I'm just not sure if, yeah, I have some other ideas that I kind of like to develop. That's not to say that I might go back in 2 years and write an 11th, but for the moment I'm going to keep it at 10. And again, I haven't had this conversation with my agent. Sorry, I probably shouldn't even be talking about it.
I promise we won't. Well, what's been nice about the books is sort of the arc of the relationship, of where it started, based on mutual disdain, and
Yes.
and as it's grown to where they are now, and you know, all the things that are happening in their lives, and you know how they've sort of integrated their friends and you know, put up with each other's families and all of those kinds of things. So that's really kind of nice. But I'll hope that inspiration strikes. So that one of the other things is, you know, we talked a little bit about how it had been made. The series has been made into Murder in Provence for BritBox, and so will there? Is there going to be another series? Is there?
We're still waiting to hear, and I'll keep you posted. Unfortunately, we just found out that BritBox is made from ITV and BBC together, and they've just separated. So that puts all the new series on kind of a tightrope, because ITV wrote to the producer and they said, we're going to stick with our established series, because now they've kind of lost the BBC. So we're waiting to hear if she can find another broadcaster. So we don't know. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. As it relates to the series, since you know they did kind of reshape the books, and on some level the characters, was that stressful for you as you went through that process of here are my books, these are my babies, and now they're hitting the screen, and they're, you know, and they made some changes, because when my husband was watching them with me, and I'm going, well, that really didn't happen in the book.
No, it's fine. No, it wasn't. Surprisingly, no, I was just so excited and so honored that no, it wasn't that stressful. And I know that a screenwriter has to work with a book that, you know, would normally be about 6 hours on screen, and she had, you know, 90 minutes so for each, which is pretty long. So I knew that she would have to make changes. And so, no, I wasn't at all worried. I knew that the producers do really good work, do really good films. I like a lot of their films and their television work. So I had faith in them. And the cast, I thought, okay, they wouldn't sign up for something that they didn't like the screenplay.
Right.
You know, somebody like Roger Allam and Nancy Carroll and Patricia Hodge. You know, I said, wow, you know, it must be a good script if they're signing up for it. So I was more excited than nervous. I really wasn't nervous, which is, you know, surprising. So
Yeah, well, as I said, well, I know we've really enjoyed them.
good.
So I'm sort of done with, I've gotten to the end of the list of the questions, so
Okay.
I'm going to open it up to
Okay.
our members. Does anyone out there have questions? And I can't really see
I
who.
think Elizabeth does.
Okay, okay, you unmuted yourself. That's good.
I did.
Yeah.
Following up on what Terry was just asking you, because it was as the reader, then seeing the show and like change
Yeah.
Ellen and some of the changes. At first I was totally taken aback,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
but then I liked it. I
Yeah.
but at first I was like the same thing with Terry. I'm like, well, that happened in a different book. That's not
Right. Yeah.
things together.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think that that always happens. If you think of, I mean, that happens to me a lot when I read a book, and I love a book and then I see it televised or at the theater, at the cinema, then you think, oh, wow, they're really taking liberties with it. But is the end product good, and has it been inspired by the books? And I'd say yes.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure.
So
Yeah, no,
yeah.
it was great, and I hope they can get a second season.
Me
Yes.
too. Yeah, and apparently, and I like the way they played with their ages, because they're about 10 years older than they are in the books.
Right.
And I thought it worked really well, because Roger Allen wanted to do it right away, and so I think then they had to adjust his, he's a certain age, and so then Maureen had to be older too. So.
But I can't remember the actress who plays her mom. She was.
Oh yeah, that's Patricia Hodge.
Yeah, she was really good too.
She's great. Yeah, I think it's Dame Patricia Hodge. Yeah, she's yeah. And she's another person that whenever I see her in something, this is long before I saw her in Murder in Provence, but if I see her name, in a television movie or at the cinema, I thought, oh wow, she's in it, then I'm going to go see it. So I was really excited to see her part of it too.
Yeah, I will say I do enjoy the characters of Maureen's parents, because
Yeah.
is so pinchy faced. So,
Yeah.
the dad is so long suffering. They're just
Yeah.
they're the great side characters. They're some of my favorites.
It's fun as a writer to have those characters. I wouldn't say they're minor characters, but almost, because you can have fun with them. And I did, and she in particular is based on so many French moms of my friends, who took part in the 1968 student riots, and and leave their always have their house at about 62 degrees, and aren't very good cooks, because it was like the post-war France, and they were these mothers were intellectuals, and they weren't going to cook. They weren't going to spend any time in the kitchen, and so they didn't teach their daughters how to cook either. So my friends can't cook. So.
Can I just ask one
Yeah.
question about that?
Yeah.
Because like the way you have written them with the Cour Mirabeau and everything, when I'm reading them, I'm often Googling places and buildings.
Oh, nice.
Making notes. And I wonder if you have found that a lot of people, I don't want to say groupies, but groupies come to X and try to recreate the walk that he makes through the little alley.
Oh,
and I'm wondering, because you have a whole industry there now of this kind of tours.
Yeah, I mean, I have done some tours that have been organized by either bookstores or like Politics and Prose from Washington, D.C. I've done a few with them. And I will get readers who will email me and say, we're coming to X. And either we're coming to X because of your books, can you meet? So I will try to meet them in X, or what's really nice is people who say, oh, I studied in X in the 1980s and your books brought so many memories back. And so that's really nice. And some people do say, yes, is, Michaud, were they getting pastries? Is that Béchard? I'm pretty sure it is. So I'll reply right away. Yeah.
It's great. Well, I have it on my next itinerary for.
Oh, nice. Okay, good.
Forward.
Great.
Are there any other questions? Do I see any hands raised out there? Anybody in the chat? Nope.
Okay.
Well, I guess, again, just one more time to plug the book.
Oh,
So
yeah, thanks.
Disaster at the Vendome Theater. And if you signed up through the website for the link, there was a link to Romans. So Romans has the book, should have the book, and it will be, because we try and partner with our local independent
Oh,
bookstore.
yeah, great, great.
So for anybody that has not read it, and it's very good. So
Yeah.
I finished it I finally finished it this weekend. So I just want to again thank you for making the time of it. Oh, wait a minute. Someone did ask. I have a question that showed up in the chat. Do you write in French at all?
Yeah, emails, and text messages to my friends, but never anything more than that.
Can I ask a question? How is your daughter as far as like coming at the age of 3 and
Yeah.
growing up in the system? Does she, like, a lot of times I hear expats, the kids go back to the US for school, or?
Yeah, we put her right away. She had never been to school. She was 4 when we moved here. She had been at home with me because she was too young to go to school. And so we put her into a French school right away. We didn't do the expat thing because we thought, okay, that won't help her adjust and it won't help my French. So we stayed away from all the expats in Aix. We put her into a very old-fashioned downtown primary school called Sainte Catherine de Sienne, Catholic school. And it was a kind of small school where the directrice of the school would wait at the front door and we'd greet every child as they went in. She knew their names. It was just amazing, an amazing place. And I would say that our daughter's name is Eva. For the first few months, she resisted speaking French. She wasn't at all happy about our move. But then, as soon as she met some friends, and her French improved, I'd say, it wasn't easy at first, but it's much easier for them than for us.
Oh, yeah.
But I wouldn't say it's easy. Some people say, oh, it's so easy. I'll say, oh, no, it wasn't that easy for her, because they resist a little bit. They're mad, that you've left wherever, that we left Santa Cruz. But now, now she's a Parisian woman. So. Yeah.
Did she go to university in France or?
No, she went to London.
Oh.
Yeah, she went to London. She graduated. She got a really good grade on her baccalaureate, and she did but she had saw how her friends' older siblings had been actually very just broken down by the école by being normalienne during the Grande École in France, and these were very, very bright kids, and you lose the first 2 years. You lose that when you're 18, 19, I'd say even 20. Those years are just gone if you're a normalien. And that was your choice: either be a normalien, do 3 years of prep study, 2 years of prep study before you even get into one of those schools, or go directly into a really good English university. And so she said, Mom, there's no choice for me. And I said, go ahead. We support you on that. And we're really glad, she got into University College. And so, she didn't lose. It's just, they're great schools because it's based in France, because it's based solely on your grades, which I think is the right way to go. But boy, they just take a lot out of you, and we didn't want her to go through that. She didn't have to.
Yeah, I've heard it can be brutal.
Yeah.
So I think we've reached that point that I get to thank you for your time, and thank you. Tell us how much we've enjoyed having you. We'll send you the link when we put it up on the website. And again, the book is Disaster at the Vendome Theater. And
thanks for the invitation too.
I was it was a shot in the dark because I love the books, and I started coordinating some of this, and I went, well, okay, the worst you can do is ignore me or not.
No, I wouldn't.
So I was so excited. I have to say I was so excited, and so I really enjoyed taking the time, and I look forward. I know I speak for others. I look forward to finding out what you're going to write next, and and now I'm going to have to go back and find your articles for Bon Appetit, the old book because was I know they did an issue on Provence or the south of France. They did one at one point, which I think I kept somewhere in my library.
Oh, I did. Yeah, I think it was around 19. I want to say 1999 or something.
Something around it.
The whole issue was Provence, and I did an article on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. So I think I've got it somewhere in here, and I've got to go track it down. So for that. So again, I want to thank you on behalf of the Alliance, and thank you all for dialing in. And au revoir, à la prochaine.
Au revoir, and enjoy Pasadena. It's a beautiful spot.
Yes,
I love Pasadena.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.